Hey everyone, how's it going? It's your boy Skilled Fawn, and today we are going to be talking about Lords of the Fallen. Before we get into the video, I want to further introduce myself for those unfamiliar. I've been playing Souls games since my introduction to the series at Dark Souls 3's release. Since then, I have found a lot of joy when playing through these games. A couple of years ago, I decided to start posting videos and doing challenge runs. Now I'm up to my 30th challenge on Elden Ring, alongside various other games like Sekiro, Lies of P. Lords of the Fallen is a Souls-like game that came out October 13th, 2023. Before the release, I had heard a fair amount of news on the game and was hyped to play it. Fortunately though, time passed without me playing it and was thus placed on the backlogs. About 3 to 4 months ago, I saw that Demon Souls and Lords of the Fallen were on sale on the PlayStation Store, so I knew I had to grab them. Ultimately, I went through my first playthrough and was genuinely interested and surprised by the game, both good and bad. As we delve deeper into the video and Lords of the Fallen, understand that these are my opinions. If you have a similar or differing opinion, I would love to hear these in the comments below. Make sure to smash the like button, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. There will be spoilers in this review, so take that as you wish. Without further ado, let's get into the review. To set the stage and to summarize the game/genre for those unfamiliar, I'll briefly explain this. Essentially, the player can choose various starting classes, where one could be a knight and the other option could be a mage. The player has 3 bars at the top corner, one for health, another for stamina, and lastly one for mana. To regain health, the player will use a crucifix. The concept is similar to Dark Souls' Estus Flask and Lies of P's Pulse Cells. Next, the player travels throughout the various zones, collecting key items, fighting enemies, and taking down bosses. This is a quick simplification of the game and its mechanics, so let's dive into the specifics. Let's talk about the story in Lords of the Fallen. The game starts with an opening cutscene showcasing the events that led up to the player entering the lands. Essentially, there was a war that broke out between the demon god Adir and mankind. Eventually, humanity defeated the demon god, but they remained vigilant, making sure to watch for signs of his return. After some time, Adir rose again, creating creatures to potentially stand against humanity. That is basically where the game starts. Starting the game, the player will receive a special lamp and a marking. The lamp I will talk about more further into this segment. Going through the starting zone, we reach the first boss, Pieta. I'll talk about her more in the bosses section, but to explain her story, she was one of those vigilant guards entrusted with the sacred duty of waiting for Adir's return. Instead, she gave into his corruption, becoming a slave to his will. Upon defeating her, she comes back into Aureus' light. Below Pieta's boss room is Skyros Bridge, the sanctuary for the followers of Aureus. Aureus is symbolically equivalent to God or Christ, and a lot of the various radiant spells connect back to him. Playing through the game, we find that there is a world parallel to ours. Either by choice or on death, the player can enter the Umbral Realm. This shadowy and Lovecraftian world runs laterally with the normal world. Using the lamp found at the beginning, the player can peer into this realm or go in full force. Entering the Umbral Realm does a few things, such as allowing the player to possibly find a shortcut or progression path. Key items can be found such as healing upgrade materials, and lastly, horrific creatures that hunt the player. There's a lot more that goes on in the Umbral Realm, which I will talk about later on, but want to cover it in the story section because this ties directly into it. Reaching the various beams of light that pulse into the sky, we purify them using the lamp's power. We do this more than a few times because there are a decent number of those beams. Going through the bosses, purifying the beams, and upgrading our character along the way, we reach the final boss. Adir, the Bereft Exile, is an interesting boss to say the least, but the dialogue and lore he provides is on another level. To simply explain, Adir claims to be mankind's creator. When he fell to humanity the first time, he understood their power and destructiveness. Because of this, he created the Rogar, which are those creatures that we see in Umbral, to hopefully stop humanity. When he rises, creating the Umbral creatures, that is basically the start of the game, and it is really saddening to fight this boss. I relate this instance to Demon Slayer, the manga/anime. Essentially, the swordsman in the story fights demons to find a cure for his sister. The part I relate to Lords of the Fallen is that before a fight, the swordsman would always hear how utterly terrible the person is that he's gonna fight, only to find out when he was fighting it that the person thought it was doing the right thing all along. When the demon was defeated, the swordsman, even though it was a demon, felt pity and sorrow towards him. I think that is what Lords of the Fallen's ending story beat was trying to achieve. During the whole game, it was repeatedly told how awful Adir was and what he did, but never why. For the whole game, the player is thinking how terrible he is, only to find out that what he did was a reaction to what humanity did to him as their creator. I don't know, at least for me, I found it to be interesting boss fight. So we end up killing basically this demon and god conglomeration that supposedly created humanity and the umbral creatures. The game ends with some text saying how the lamp is truly never satisfied, and that in light they will fall. Let's talk about the world design next. Lords of the Fallen has a fairly massive world. Though its world may not be as interconnected as DS1 or Bloodborne, you'll find some areas that are interconnected and seem to flow really well. A lot of these examples are in the later game zones, but there are definitely others spread throughout. Most of the areas, I would say it's intuitive where to go, and the progression pathway seems similar to DS3, but with a more interconnected world. The various zones are all beautiful to see, and it is nice that each area has their own distinctive style. From the fire castle having fire, lava, and flaming skeletons, to the lower depths of the cistern with its winding tunnels filled with water, each area is distinct. One of the reasons I dislike Dark Souls 2 is that some areas repeat the same style used, so it's nice to see that Lords of the Fallen is avoiding that. I should also mention the Umbral zones. I really enjoyed going into the Umbral realm. Seeing the Lovecraftian things was horrific in a beautiful manner. The various eyes that stare as you walk around, the people in the lava reaching up for the sky, the giant hands coming together, it was really cool to see. This is one of the reasons I highly recommend this game to those that like Bloodborne. Though it is a different beast to tackle, it shares a lot of the same mechanics and has that horror-esque world design. Subsequently, I want to discuss the boss fights. I would say overall the bosses are well made and are balanced. There were definitely some outliers that I felt weren't well made or were OP as heck, but those were far and few. Players given the choice between playing a Sekiro, Bloodborne, or Dark Souls playstyle. To explain, the player can parry bosses' attacks like in Sekiro to then punish them. Their option is to use that Bloodborne-like dash and go through enemies' combos to find an opening. Lastly is the Dark Souls strategy of using a shield and doing a full dodge roll way. One reason I really enjoyed Elden Ring is because of its variety of ways to take down bosses. I think Lords of the Fallen also delivers on this. I'll mention a few boss fights and then talk about what I really liked about them. Spurned Progeny had a really funny intro cutscene to them being one of the most horrific creatures. The fight itself was fairly tough, especially that second phase, but it felt so satisfying to dodge that hand that shoots out of its mouth. Possibly my favorite boss in this whole game is Judge Cleric, the Radiant Sentinel. From the insane attacks that she wields to her awesome design, it is such a fun fight. Her first phase, she will use a bunch of holy attacks to try to take down the player. Using a banner in one hand and a sword in the other, she fights us ferociously. One of the coolest attacks is when she covers the ground in arrows. In her second phase, she reveals her true form and shows that she accepted Adir's corruption. Using the same moveset as her first phase, but with fiery attacks, is super cool to see. The Sundered Monarch was a fun fight, and I would probably put this under Judge Cleric, but above Spurned Progeny. The Monarch is the second to last boss fight in the game, right before Adir. This dude went so hard with his combo attacks, but dang, after getting those movements down and the rhythm, it felt super satisfying to dodge those AoE attacks. Adir was notable, but mostly for his dialogue. Those lines he threw out were super interesting, and it was a really cool twist. These were some of the notable fights in Lords of the Fallen, but there were definitely some other cool fights. Let's talk about the new and improved mechanics, starting with the lamp in Umbral Realm. The lamp is a really cool twist to the Souls genre, and I find it to be a welcome mechanic. Though the lamp itself isn't the most useful, it definitely helps in a ton of situations. From using the Soul Flay option on enemies to build up a ton of wither damage, to using it to find healing upgrade material. I found it to be really helpful and cool. Using the lamp to peer into the Umbral Realm and even entering the realm is great, and I think one of the best things that makes Lords of the Fallen stand out from the crowd. I like how they handled the rally mechanic used in Bloodborne. Essentially, the player, when in the Umbral Realm, can regain health if not hit. This also can be used with shields, and it will keep stacking until you receive a full hit when not blocking. This creates some playstyle variety, as the player can choose to either use a shield to block incoming attacks, or try to play as if you are in Bloodborne. The last mechanic that I want to mention is the various resting points. In the Dark Souls series, the player can find bonfires to rest and gain back health, Estus flasks, and spell usage. In Lords of the Fallen, these are the equivalent to vestiges that were left behind when previous people fell. The new and improved mechanic of this is that players will find umbral seeds. As you go through the game, you can find spots to plant the seeds when peering into the Umbral Realm. This acts as a mini bonfire slash vestige, allowing the player to rest, level up, etc. These were some of the new and improved mechanics. There are definitely others that I didn't mention, but I found these to be not as notable as the one talked about previously. Next, I want to discuss performance and optimization within the game. When I started my game within the first 5 minutes, I somehow got myself stuck, and I thought to myself, so it's gonna be one of these games. Only to find out that yeah, it was a pretty rare ordeal. Now I definitely had my fair share of FPS drops, alongside other glitches like this dude that after death would just not stop moving, and enemies' clothes going crazy. But I have to say these happened far and few. I do have to say though that it happened enough where I was surprised how poorly the PS5 was keeping up, but I digress. If you are hesitant to purchase this game because of performance and optimization problems, I'd say not to worry about it as much. Yes, it will definitely occur, just like most games, but it isn't a buggy or broken mess like Jedi Survivor on release. Let's talk about the good. I think the game has a strong sense of its art direction, boss fights, and world design. The strongest point is what makes it stand out from the titans that are FromSoft games, and that is the Umbral Realm. The vestige seeds that can be planted where the player chooses is a neat mechanic, and it helps to make certain boss runbacks pretty bearable. Another thing I enjoyed was the various Light Reaper encounters. This boss acts similarly to Pursuer in DS2, so the player will find them in some pretty funny locations. Taking the various aspects that made Sekiro, Bloodborne, and the Dark Souls series great and combining them, I think worked well and should be praised for such a monumental task. Now let's talk about the bad, because there's always going to be some bad parts in games. I have to say that at times, especially some of the early bosses, it felt like a Dark Souls 1 boss fight with a bunch of extra glowing attacks or something. Yeta, the first boss, I would say has that level of easiness, though Dark Souls 1 is still tough and can wreck me to this day. Yeta's attacks are telegraphed at the same speed as Iron Golem's attacks. Needless to say, they are extremely telegraphed and easy to dodge. Now on one hand, this is great for newcomers to the genre, but then on the other hand, it can feel like a cakewalk. Next is the ending. Though I enjoyed Adir and his dialogue, the ending was extremely lackluster. Yes, there is a short cutscene after Adir's defeat, but the ending is really just that text. Now I'm sure there are probably other endings, but this one at least felt underwhelming for me. Lastly, was cleansing the various beams of light. I figured the first time when I was going to cleanse the beam that was going to be this spectacular event, especially since you just fought this boss fight, with a lamp doing this crazy thing to purify it. It said it just shoots out some butterflies, and yeah, that's basically it. It was just super underwhelming, disappointing, but I don't know, maybe when I go through again, I will look at it differently. We'll have to see. In conclusion, Lords of the Fallen is a really fun game to play. It has an easy to understand story, distinct world design with each zone being unique, awesome boss fights, and lastly, new and improved mechanics. There were some times where I found performance and optimization of the game to be subpar, but these occurred rarely. The game had its fair share of good and bad moments, but I believe the good too far outshine the bad. Should you pick up Lords of the Fallen and play it? Yeah, I would definitely recommend giving it a chance with a first playthrough. I had a lot of fun playing through Lords of the Fallen and plan to do a challenge run on the game soon. Anyways, these were my opinions and thoughts after going through the game. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my statements. I'm curious to see the feedback. Make sure to hit the like button, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Try to do something kind for someone today. This is your boy Skilled Fawn, and I'm out.